All right, I'm here with Glenn Wallin. Glenn Wallin, we actually went to high school together. Glenn was a college athlete, studied biology, played arena football for 4 years after college, found his calling in education shortly after playing arena football, worked as a high school athletic director until he became a husband father where he wanted to have more time at home. And he is currently a middle school teacher and a high school football coach. So, welcome, Glenn.
Right on. Thanks for having me, Jesse. Good to be here.
Yeah, so one of the reasons why I wanted to have you on is because you post a lot on comments on the content that I make and kind of being that cheerleader, because we do go back, we went to high school together, and you were like, you're cheering on some of the content that I'm making, agreeing with a lot of the stuff that I'm putting out there that might not be very popular. So I want to thank you for the support, being one of those people who's willing to support the content.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, when it comes to stuff like that is getting out in the world, it's great to find people that kind of have that same viewpoint so we can share that and promote it and maybe, you know, just like in education, touch a few people in terms of kind of enlightening them on things that could be happening around them or just to help them maybe take a step back and, take a picture and see what's going on. Kind of like we do day to day as parents, right? Like it's a live and learn basis as we go through this motion,
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm always going to be your cheerleader and promoting you and hoping this thing takes off for you. And, we can have another podcast here in about episode 111.
Yes. Yes. No, I look forward to episode 111 with you on it.
Yeah.
So yeah, I was at your wedding. You invited me to your wedding. How has your life changed? Because you did get married, what, like 8 years ago?
Yes.
Or no?
Yeah.
Yeah. Right?
Yep. Yeah, we're
Yeah,
going.
eight
Well,
years ago.
let's see here. Don't tell Kels I'm counting the years here in terms of math, but we were October 6th, 2018. So we're approaching
6 years.
Yeah, we're approaching 7 years here in the fall. So yeah,
Okay.
right on the money.
Somewhere in
Yeah.
there. And how has your life changed since going from, um, high school, college to being married?
Good.
And how has that, even being married, having children, changed how you would have acted? How have you known what your life would have been?
Oh, I say it all the time. I wish I could write myself a note at age 22 to let me know that someday I was going to be a 35-year-old father and husband, right? Like a lot of things would have would have been different through that board. But yeah, as far as life changing, I think all of us that are currently in the world right now have went through a lot of changes across that board, right? We lived through a pandemic. We went through a lot of political changes. We went through a lot of changes that I think either put you one side or the other in terms of your viewpoints, somewhat in terms of humanity has played a role in, I think, separating us more than I think we were before that. So the change from me pre-marriage to now is vastly different to the person that I am today. I do things solely on the basis of my family. My entire existence is to make sure the structure, the home, the household, everything is in functioning order to the best that I can. And I'm constantly reevaluating myself on that dynamic because I feel like any portion of my life, I've always been trying to evaluate myself to be better, right? So that has always stuck with me. But in terms of the changing of who I am, I had some nicknames in my 20s that I don't get called that anymore because I'm not that person, right? Like we could go back to some of those what I was doing in my 20s in terms of today. But yeah, man, it's a vast difference. I think I would be proud of who I am today back then, but I definitely would have lived a lot different along the route. So I'd love to write myself a letter and date it to age 25, Glenn Wallin.
Yeah. So another thing that I talk about is how valuable fathers are. And you have two boys, and I am sure you plan on making a very large and positive impact on their lives. And being that we grew up a little bit together, how do you think, like, to you, what is the importance of a father in a boy's childhood?
A leader by example and not
Mm-hmm.
by voice. You know, I
Mm-hmm.
think I think I really put that on my shoulders, that how I react to things,
Mm-hmm.
to an action, right? Everything's going to have an equal or opposite reaction. So my goal is to always have a positive reaction to that opposite action. So anytime something's negative, I want to react in a positive way, right? Yeah, like
Yeah.
the way I feel it is if I react negative, I messed up along the way to have that negative reaction, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
you and I growing up at Sparks High School, I think, it was kind of the norm within our demographic and, our friends, that there, a lot of the times there wasn't a father in the household. Single mom was working
Mm-hmm.
really rigorously, a lot of free time for us to kind of do our things and maybe not have a certain role model to lead us in that right direction. I was fortunate enough to, you know, even though my parents were separated, I was fortunate enough to still have a father in the vicinity, always at my athletics and coaching. So I had that dynamic. But to me, to look back at that, my number one thing is, one, to keep the house together in any way, shape, or
Yeah.
form, have a solid fundamental relationship with my wife that is working so the kids can see that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because that's big. Like when the other day I was in the kitchen, we're making dinner, I give my wife a hug, and the next thing I know, that my two sons run and give a group hug, right? That was all just on initial sight. There was no talking about how to act, there was no doing anything other than just them seeing that environment and running to that. So yeah, to me, it's all by leadership, and I think, like I said earlier, I caught myself yelling at my son the other day because he just tackled Cooper like full speed. I mean, Cooper was just hanging out, doing his own thing. Cooper's 2, and Cash is 4, right? So there's that little separation of strength there. And dude, Cash just steamrolled him, right? And I caught myself react a little sooner than I think I should have, and my voice raised a little sooner than I think it should have, right? And I need to
Yeah. Yeah.
step back there and realize, like, one, they're boys, that stuff's going to happen, and two, my reaction needed to take place shortly after and let them kind of handle their emotional regulation, as long as there
Yeah.
isn't
Yeah.
like some death involved or some type of danger
Mm-hmm.
environment.
Yeah.
And me yelling, to me, I lost the game before I started yelling, right? If I
Yeah.
have to
Yeah.
raise my voice and start yelling at you for something during the leadership role, I lost that game along the way. I take that in the classroom. If I have to literally yell at 24 students in my classroom because they're not on task or they're not doing what they should be, and they're just acting like middle school students and being impulsive, which is normal, especially when they're sitting in a classroom all day for 7 hours, which is not good for kids. But
Dude,
anyways,
I remember being a middle school student.
dude,
Yeah.
dude, like, and it's the same, right? So that same energy and feeling we get, they get. But if I have to yell at an entire class, I lost my order along the first 10, 20, 25 minutes of class earlier in the school year when I was trying to set that motion. So yeah, to me, everything is lead by an example and kind of let things play out the best that they can, and support. So yeah, that's kind of the way that I look at it. And number one goal in my life is to keep a functional order and solid relationship within the family household.
Yeah. The culture we live in today makes it just way too easy for parents to separate. We don't we don't truly make a covenant. We make this kind of commitment with an exit plan in motion as well. And I'll see people on social media, you know, I've seen like women say, you know what, ladies, you need to have like your own bank account that he doesn't know about, and like you got to be taking care of you. And it's like you guys are putting a terrible message in the mind of women to where they feel that they just have to have an exit strategy. And this specific video that I'm talking about had some like 4 million views on TikTok. And I'm just like, holy shit, that is not good.
Yeah.
Not good at all.
Yeah.
Even men, I mean, we live in a generation where they don't feel like they need to take responsibility for things. They're not being held accountable. And the commitment to, husband and wife, I think, is so valuable. And again, we are humans, so we're not going to get along perfectly. We are going to have our fights. We are going to struggle. But if we continue to make sure that we stay yoked and we are growing together, it's going to be awesome. Like my wife and I, we're going on 13 years. By no means were we married for 13 years, but we're different people, but we love each other even more today than at any other point. And we're different people, but we've chose to grow together. And it's just hard to see that. I mean, I'm sure me and you, just from our own high school, know a half dozen people who've been divorced or were engaged and it was broken off. Just various things like that. It's just too easy. It's too easy to just throw in the towel. And then when you got kids in the mix, it's like, all right, there's other people involved.
Yeah. And I think the biggest thing that you touched on that I think does not play a role because of the video you just talked about in terms of being separate, trying to do your own thing, and kind of have your like protection agency where you're not together. Mm-hmm. If you're not in that same ballpark with someone, you're not going to grow with that person, right? And you cannot grow without some type of failure, something that kind of hinders you, because that's where literally growth comes from. Like nobody just showed up to somewhere and said they were good at this thing, right? They had to fail along the way and they had to grow through those dynamics that take place, and especially in a relationship. And if you are both doing your own thing and trying to protect your own little kingdom, right? You're not together. You're not going to grow together, and it's going to be easier for you to separate, especially without children, right? Especially when you don't have kids in the picture. But
yeah, even husbands who complain about their wives, like, oh, she's not even that great of a wife. She's not even that great of a mom. It's like, well, I don't hear you taking responsibility because you are the husband and therefore you are supposed to be leading by example in every facet of the marriage. Like God gave us a helper, not that she is lesser, but it's like by the helper, the leader is the one who is like setting the tone, setting the example. And if we want her to change in any way for the positive, like what are we just sitting on the couch throwing back beers watching the game every single night, or are we connecting with her, seeing what it is that she needs? Are we setting the example of we're going to the gym, we're taking care of our health, we're worried about what we're eating, we're worried about what goes in our mind, etc. And that's how we're going to get that wife and be able to grow together and really have the ultimate life of unity and support for one another.
Dude, 100%, man. And that's why, like, when things aren't working out, you think of what a single mom goes through, right? Like a single mom in a house, what that individual has to go through. They have to be the masculine and the feminine person in that household. They literally have to be two people, which means they are completely exhausted. Then they're probably also working a job, right? So the whole structure of a nuclear family is something that we're losing today, and that identity, and it's hurting our culture. If you look at like the shows that we watched as kids, right? Like the shows that you and I grew up on, even if maybe we didn't see a nuclear family in our household, we saw those nuclear families on TV.
Every
right?
show
was a nuclear family.
Yeah.
Today, it's the opposite. So when you've got someone, and unfortunately, I think it's affecting our youth that are growing up in non-nuclear families, because they are not now they're not seeing nuclear families, they're seeing the opposite, and it's accepted and it's okay to do this route.
They're normalizing it.
Exactly. So I think that is a huge battle that the younger generation, and even some just a little bit younger than us, are going to have to try and figure it out along the way. And there's going to be a lot of failures throughout that process. And it's, I feel for them. I feel for my children, the world that my children are going to grow up in. I feel like It's gonna be a completely different world than what you and I see, the same way that the world is different that our parents saw and our grandparents saw, right?
Hmm.
So yeah, it is somewhat frightening when you think about the future when you have children, right?
Yes.
When you don't have children, before I had children, I didn't think too much about the future. I wasn't too concerned about it. Sure, things were maybe even falling apart. I'm not paying attention to it. Politics, dude, I didn't give a crap about politics in my 20s and 30s.
Hmm.
Didn't affect anything outside of maybe the realm of me that maybe was not that big of a deal. Now, things that you see that are influencing others, especially our youth, dude, I am more involved in politics and trying to kind of pay attention and see what's going on because I see the influence and the pull
Yeah.
that it can have, and so yeah, yeah, this is one of the big reasons that I also cheerlead on your posts and we talk about stuff, and I've got comments because we're kind of on the same page here, and maybe it can help reach out to others and kind of help them see a different light, if things are struggling or things are going on, or just to invest time to research and look into things. That's the great thing about today. If we want to talk about some bad things about today, the great thing about today is you have so many statistics, you have so many things you can look at and research in terms of anything that you really want to get your hands on, to where it could help you reevaluate maybe what's going on and make the right decisions, so
Yeah. Anyone can come across content like this or content supporting the nuclear family with the internet. I mean, on our phones, the algorithm could be sending a video of how beneficial it is. On the other hand, it could be sending a video that promotes, single mom's the way to go. You don't need a
yeah,
man. You can do it on your own.
yeah,
But it's another reason why I just keep pumping out the content that I do in hopes of, making an impact on just a handful of people um, who come across my content and realize that men need to take responsibility. Talking about just like roles in the household, raising our kids, because we don't live in a society where we are very community anymore to be bouncing these things off each other. Men to be talking about these discussions, women to be talking about household things, being mothers, fathers talking about being fathers and checking one another. It's just not a thing anymore.
yeah.
Yeah. So
It's
it's
not, and unless you're around the right, maybe motivation or the right environment, you don't see it, and you see the other side that you're talking about on social media posts, on constant flow within what we see on our TV,
mhm.
so it's really unfortunate that there is a battle being fought here, and I don't know where that battle came from, right? Like,
Yeah.
so yeah, it is a change, and I will tell you right now, just being in education for this is my 12th year, I can tell you that the first 3 or 4 years as a teacher to the last 3 or 4 years as a teacher, it's almost like a full couple generations swing in terms of viewpoints and ideologies and how things kind of shape individuals and how they see things and are interacting with one another. Like, it is, and people want to blame COVID and people want to blame this and that, right? Um, but yeah, if I knew what the resource was, I'd be a millionaire, because I'd be able to try and you know send out the resources that would change the direction or get us on a good track. But yeah, I will say, just in a decade of teaching, the changes that I've seen in our youth, and in our environment, it is wild. Like, I feel
Yeah, they're
like I should
pretty
be at the
drastic.
end of my teaching career getting ready to retire, right? By
Yeah.
the basis of the change there, and I talk to a lot of older teachers maybe that are getting ready to retire, and they kind of have that same input where, there wasn't that big of a change from like your and I generation and the generation a little bit behind us and the generation a little bit in front of us, right? But
Hmm.
this short time frame, there is a huge difference. But
Man. Yeah, it's another reason why we wanted to homeschool. Like there was a handful of reasons, a small handful of reasons, really, of why we decided to homeschool our son. And we had other friends who wanted to homeschool, and most of them tried it, and they all threw in the towel. And now all their kids are back in public or private school, and we've just stuck with it because we're like, we can't throw in the towel. Like, what does that set an example for? We tell our kids, we're going to homeschool you. We're going to be there with every step of the way. And then it's like, you know what? You are a little difficult, so we're going to put you back in public school. That's how I look at it. Our friends, or maybe they're not even our friends, but people we knew and were pretty close with, decided to throw in the towel on their children. And it's like, I understand outsourcing your finances. I understand outsourcing your lawn care. I understand outsourcing the cleaning of your house. I understand outsourcing work and having a secretary, outsourcing parts of your business. But why the fuck are we outsourcing the education and upbringing of our children? And it is crazy that through elementary school and middle school, you get 16,000 hours back with your children if you homeschool. Think about that. 16,000 hours. And there's a lot of data that after they are 18, you're only going to see them for another 1% of their life.
Yeah.
And we just don't fucking care that we're going to miss out on all that time through elementary, middle school.
Yeah.
Because if my kids, the reason I just say elementary, middle school is because if my kids want to go to high school, I'll have had the ability to program them to the point to when they're 14 and they go to freshman in high school, because they're like, hey, some of my buddies from sports are, they're all going to XYZ high school. I want to actually go to the high school so I can be focusing on sports and I want to try it. It's like, cool. I'll have programmed them to not be a follower, to not, if someone tells you you have to wear a mask, that they're just going to be like, okay, that sounds good. I'm going to program them that just because a TV tells you to lock yourself in the house doesn't mean you have to lock yourself in your house.
Yeah, dude.
I'm going to be able to program them to think for themselves and stand up if they feel something's not right. I'm going to be able to program them to be creative and not let their creativity through elementary school be crushed, and them just learn how to just follow directions. And I feel like by the time that they're in high school, they'll be confident enough in who they are as an individual that they won't need to follow. They won't need to get into the certain crowds, because they'll be content and confident humans. So I don't care if my kids want to go to high school, even though high school starts getting even like wilder. But like, me and you went to the same high school. You never saw me drink one thing of alcohol. No one ever saw me smoke weed ever. No one ever saw me do anything like that. And I still thought I was the coolest motherfucker there was. I didn't care if other people had to do any of those things. Now, maybe I'm the anomaly. But at the same time, I want to be able to figure out what it is about me that didn't care about any of that stuff. Even in college, I wasn't doing any of that stuff. And how I can program my children to be so confident in themselves that they'll never fall for peer pressure if they choose to go to high school. Elementary school, I don't want them around a bunch of other dud-ass kids. I don't want them to be learning about LGBTQ in third grade, because it's third grade. When I was in third grade, I didn't know what gay was. And now they're telling kids that they get to pick, which letter are you? And I'm like, whoa. When I was in third grade, dude, I was like worrying about like if I could catch the football from like the fourth and fifth graders, because I would sneak onto their side of the playground.
Yeah, or you're running from the girls because they were trying to take your hat, right? Because
yes,
that was
exactly.
their way of like,
it's like even in sixth grade, like I would call a kid gay because it meant you weren't cool, but I didn't know what the word actually meant, what was going on. And now they're teaching it at such a young age. I'm like, well, you shouldn't be affirming children's feelings. Yeah. Like if the kid's like, I want to be a cat, the teacher's job isn't to be like, well, then you're probably a cat. It's like, what the heck?
Yeah, and I think a lot of educators, understand that, and I'll speak from just faculty that I've worked with and
Mm-hmm.
in that ballpark, and I taught health when things were starting to change a little bit, right? And I'd get questions because the kids are seeing things and hearing things that maybe they did not see, earlier on when I was teaching health. And the first thing that I did as soon as I felt that something just didn't feel off, like it felt just a little weird for me to answer that question, it was a quick response to say, I would like you to take that to your family and ask them
Yeah.
that question, right? Because there's a place for, in terms of the classroom, that needs to be teacher to student, and then there's
Yeah.
things that the kid or the child needs to talk to their mom, their dad, their grandma, their grandpa, whoever their family and guardians are at home, right? Like
Yeah.
that's where those
Yes.
conversations need to be taking place. And I think we're seeing that change a little bit in the educational system, right? So, um, yeah, that's that. I'm with you right there in terms of that dynamic. And then, yeah, I
But
think
there's
unfortunately, like I said earlier, with the kids that maybe are growing up where we grew up in, maybe somewhat of an inner city school where they don't have the opportunity where even if a single mom who's working two jobs wanted to homeschool their kid, right? They don't have the resources or time to do that. And I think this is hurting this group the most because they don't have that support at home and they're seeing a different support on TV and their social media. And now education's changing a little bit too. So that's the biggest influence, right? When you go to a home like yours or another nuclear family, whether they're outsourcing their children to education or providing an educational system at home for their children until they choose or want to go to a school.
yeah.
That's there's more of an influence from us to them, aside from kids that maybe don't have that influence. They're getting more of an influence on the realm. So I always try and pull those kids to sports. Like
Yes.
initially any type of that's where you get a different environment where these kids kind of learn a little different aspect outside of the classroom and more of an accepting realm that athletics bring within that dynamic. So that's the first thing in terms of, you know, that could kind of help fight some of that is definitely athletics and joining a team and having a coach or someone that can be a role model for you or whatever it may be, right? So
Yeah. And I feel for the single mom. I feel for the single mom so much that at my old company, when I would hire people, if I even found out, if they would be like, "Yeah, I'm a single mom," so like for my schedule, I'd be like, "Fuck, all right, I'll hire you."
yeah, right.
They're like,
Yes.
"What? I'm hired," and I'm like, "You're hired." And I would no bullshit. If there was a single mom, I would just hire them. And the old company that I worked for, we were performance based, and I was very braggadocious that we were number one. And I let everybody know because I was competitive. And it's like we fucking murder everybody. And uh but I would hire the single moms. And I remember one time, sorry, that's my dog. I remember one time one of the moms was asking me like, "Oh, you hired me because of this," and I was like, "No, I literally hired you because you're a single mom. Otherwise, I wouldn't have hired you." And they were like so crushed. They're like, "What?" I was like, "Yeah, you were a terrible interviewer. Just your whole energy." I was like, "This person, you are going to be more difficult than productive because with single mom comes baggage. Son's sick. Guess what? They got to leave and go get him. Something happens with their son. It's on them. Kid's sick. It's on them." But I was always just had that soft spot. So let's get that out there. I've always had a soft spot for moms.
Yeah.
The when it comes to the homeschooling and them not being able to, I get it and I feel for them. And it's like I want to be able to start a co-op where single moms can come and like bring their kids and like learn outside on the ranch,
Good.
etc., etc. But as far as the other point you said of getting them into sports, I think that is vitally important, especially for single moms, to where I'm like, no, your son needs father figures. So you need to sign your son up for wrestling And I'm telling you, you need to do that. That might be weird that I'm telling you, one of my employees, that you have to sign your son up for wrestling because he needs a father figure. He needs to be in something where it's just tough and like people are kicking each other's asses. You know, you have a man in there who's going to hold him accountable for things. You know, there's going to be adversity that he's going to have to overcome. You can't protect him. And he's going to have so much energy taken out of him. You're not going to have to worry about what he wants to do after dinner as far as like,
Yeah.
I'm going to go play basketball with my friends down the street. It's like, no, you're not. You're too tired. You got to get ready for wrestling. Otherwise, they're going to kick your ass again.
Yeah.
But yeah, I literally had like 2 of my employees who are single moms sign their sons up for wrestling because it's like that you need to get them in sports. You need to get them in sports.
Yeah. Dude.
Yeah.
Huge components there for sure. You know? So yeah, I think there is in that regard, as we talked about education and maybe some things that could hinder some influence that are going on, there is some good dynamics like high school athletics and extracurricular activities and things that you can get involved in, right? So it's not all lost in that
No,
regard. But yeah, I mean, when you think about it, if you can, like I'm full go. If my kid turns 5 next year, so he would be ready to start our public educational system, right? He's as of age to start it, and
was that to start kindergarten?
mm-hmm. Yeah, you
Okay.
start your kindergarten years. I think you have to be 5 by August. I'd have to double check it. But yeah, that's his age, and I'm just thinking, one, yeah, I don't think kids should be sitting in a classroom all day and getting maybe 30, 40 minutes of recess, right, to go out and shake their arms out and then come back in.
Especially boys.
Yeah, so there is a need and a resource for your co-op, dude. Your co-op would kill it, and that's and back to when I think children or parents try to homeschool and they send their kids back. I think the biggest aspect of that is I think parents take their kids out of school and then they try to do school in their home.
They try to do school.
I think that's the biggest problem there.
100%.
Don't do school when you're home.
They're like, we're going to sit here for 6 hours, 2 hours of science, 2 hours is math. You're going to get 30-minute break, and then you're going to do reading for 2 hours and writing for 2 hours. And I'm just like, why would you do that? Yeah. We are unschooling our children. I don't want them to even know what school is. It's okay for them to know the word.
Yeah.
But the fact that they have to sit down all day, it's like, no.
Yeah.
Like when we go to the store, I literally give my son my debit card or I'll give him cash. And I'm like, this is on you, bud. And he is literally talking to the person, looking up, saying this, and here's my money. And it's like, dude, you better figure out if they gave you the right change.
Yeah, right.
And he's 7. And like, we do a lot of that stuff. Or like, he can cook all his own meals. How many 7-year-olds out there are going to cook all their own meals and for their younger sibling? And he was doing that at like, we were having him make scrambled eggs at like 3 years old. No bullshit.
Dude, that's
he was
impressive.
cracking the eggs. And same with our other son. The only thing about our younger son is that the older one wants to do it for him. And it's like, all right, that's nice of you, but he needs to learn it too. But we will have them do things like that. It's like, if he wants something, he wanted football gloves because he's playing flag football.
Oh, right on.
So it's like, okay, you got to go mow. I thought they were like $60, $70. So I'm like, okay, he charges $20 to mow someone's lawn. So I'll be like, how many lawns do you got to mow? If it's $70, he has to mow 4 lawns. So he goes and mows 4 lawns. And we go to the sporting goods store, Shields, and he finds a pair. And I didn't even look at the price. He goes up. They were on sale for $22, which was fucking awesome. But I wasn't even in line with him. I go away. And he goes up to the line, talks to them, hands them the money, counts it, does all that stuff. So like, that's math. That's like life skills that we're doing. Or if he wants, let's say it's something special and we go to Whole Foods and he wants to get like a slice of pizza, we'll just say, I make him do it all by himself. He's just this little 7-year-old walking through, asking the person if he can have a slice of pizza, taking his money, going and getting in line, and I'm nowhere near. I can make sure that I can see just an eye on him to just watch to make sure he doesn't fucking see something shiny. And then he's like walking somewhere else all of a sudden. It's like, dude, we got to go. We're going to go to wrestling. We're going to go do this. But it's just, there's so much more life skills that are beneficial than just having him sit there and learn about some fucking thing that he's never going to use in his life. And like, he's really into doing Legos. So it's the one toy that I will buy him because he likes the engineering part.
Right on.
He likes to look at the directions and then build the whole thing. And then after that, he really doesn't care about it. He doesn't play with the end result. He wants to do the problem solving.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, all right, dude, I'll buy you Legos to the freaking cows come home because when I mean Legos, we'll buy him the 18 and up. So it'll be for age 18 and up, like 5,000 pieces. And he'll bust it out in 2-3 days.
Yeah.
And we don't just let him sit there and do it all day, but that is his thing. And so it's like, okay, if he's into this engineering thing, problem solving thing, let's push him towards that. But in school, you can't because they have 20 something kids or 30 kids and they want them all to be going at the same pace. And the boy loves to read too. And I know he reads more at our house than if he was in school. There's
he wouldn't
just
like
not
reading
time.
if he's at school, it wouldn't
Yeah.
he probably wouldn't like reading in that environment,
Yeah.
So
And there's just not the time for him to read as much as he does. There's not as much time for him to build things as much as he does if he was even in a public school. And then he gets to go out there to the ranch with me. I'll take him to business meetings and he'll sit there and listen. And it's like he's learning things. And then our 3-year-old, he just turned 3 this month. He has his stuff that he's into that he wants to do, and it's like, okay, let's hone this. And they have such different personalities.
Oh, for sure. It's awesome.
Mine are like copy and paste as far as what they look like, but they are just two different ass humans.
Yes, dude.
And so being a father, and I think a father who's like aware, it's like I gotta coach them different on life and their activities. Talk to them differently, not because of the age gap, because of the different personalities that they have. And in school, not that teachers don't try to teach their kids differently. It's like, where do you have the time? You have 30 kids, 20 kids. How are you going to? Yeah, they're handcuffed. Yeah, they're exactly. And it's like, you got to keep moving it forward. You can't tell like my one son, it's like, okay, it's good that you get excited that you're just like a little animal, but you got to use that when you're at wrestling because my little son goes to wrestling too. But in this instance, this is where you're going to have to work on your patience, bud. This is where you're going to have to do this. You're going to have to hone in that aggressiveness and use it for that. My older son, it's like, hey, not everyone's going to want to play the game your rules or the game by your rules. You're going to have to learn to adapt. Like, how are you going to be aware of when your emotions are starting to rise? How are you? What are some of the red flares? And he's like, yeah, you're right. Okay. He wants things to be like explained to him, but you just can't do that in a regular school setting, which is unfortunate.
Yeah, you're on a curriculum based. You run through this with one class, you go through it with the next, right? It's all that same format. Generally, how I see it is, I will tell you, when kids come in and they join late because let's say they were, I don't even want to call it homeschool, right? I hate saying homeschool because it's not school at home, right? It's home education. It is a whole new ballgame, right? And I have like my own ideas. If I were to start a school, it would be completely different based on a curriculum that we see and we're all normalized to today, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, I will tell you that the kids that are educated at home for a certain portion of time, and then they come to school because maybe they want to play sports with their with their counterparts, and they want to have that school experience of homecoming and all the things that high school really kind of has for
Mm-hmm.
those kind of opportunities, right? Those kids are more advanced. If they haven't went through a curriculum base, taking these standardized tests and everything that's putting them on a portion to make sure they are ready to go to the next round, right? They're not
Mm-hmm.
taking those standardized tests, they're not doing anything. They are more advanced than those kids, right? So back then when you and I went to school, we used to think, oh, homeschooled, like this, you know, probably not going to know how to like talk or communicate, like kind of just the off the student, which I don't think ever was the case, and it's not today, especially not today. Nobody knows how to talk to each other. Like kids don't know how to interact in general, so it doesn't really even matter with that social dynamic. And when you're educating your kid at home, they're getting those social interactions at sports. They're getting those social interactions when you take them to public places. They are getting those
Yep.
social interactions in a more life context than sitting in a classroom trying to contain their energy and pay
Yeah.
attention and learn, right? Like there's so many things fighting a student's brain to learn in the classroom. I always say this year I actually have two of my classes where they flip flop. I've got sixth graders that I have first period one day, seventh period at the end of the day. So I get them when they first show up and when they're about to leave. And I also have eighth graders in that same dynamic where they switch schedules on different days that we're running through. Dude, those students on seventh period to first period, they're different kids. Like
Totally different.
I should call them different names because they are not the same kids that I have in that first period, because the system where we're sitting in a chair all the way throughout the day, by the time seventh period rolls around, it's tough. And I think the system is preparing our youth to be employees for a company someday where they will
Yeah.
have a seventh period at their workforce where they have to maintain that energy to be productive during that seventh period before they clock out and go home, right? But these are not employees for a workforce. These are children that are, I think, missing crucial time that could be utilized elsewhere, right? So I think education at home is awesome because you're doing more life skills. Your kids are outside. You're getting more time with your kids when you're not. Someday, whether you're a parent that sees this or not, someday we are all going to be 50, 60, 70. If we're lucky, right? We get to be 50, 60, 70 years old. And we are all going to want to take that remote and hit that rewind button to this moment, right? Where we are right now. Because this is gold. This is the best chapter of my life. And when I'm 50, 60, I will tell somebody this was the best chapter of my life. There is nothing better than being that person and a father and a husband. There is nothing that even comes close to it, right?
Yeah.
But I think some of us, we get so busy with our jobs. We're working 60, 70 hours a week. We're just scraping and we're getting by and we're missing that identity to where we are right now. And someday we're going to think, dang, I missed a lot. I missed a lot of that time. Right. And I maybe just be in education. I see that from the parent aspect to the kid aspect. Right. And I see that difference in understanding. Like I see parents that are working and missing an athletic event. Like, don't do that. Like, do not miss your child's athletic event for a work, right? Like that, you're showing up to your kid's athletic event is 110 times more important than whatever was happening or was going to happen at work. And I don't even care what that work was, right? Like it is
Yeah.
not more important than being there for your kid. And I think unfortunately at some point we only learn that later on when we're in our 50s and 60s. I'm like, dang,
Mm-hmm.
I missed that playoff game because I was in an interview, or I was in this context of a job and I missed that playoff game or that. And it doesn't have to be sports. It could be it could be like a music show or some type of hobby or art, or like acting, anything. Like you can't miss that stuff, right? And I think
Yeah.
the context of when you get to educate your kids at home, you don't miss any of that stuff. Like you're there for all of it, right?
Yeah.
And I think, I always say this. I know a lot about sports, right? If I had to think of like what's my trade, right? Like I'm a coach. I understand sports. I understand kind of how to, maybe get something out of a student athlete that maybe they didn't know was there, and try and find that dynamic. Like I'm a humble person. I'll never say anything or talk myself up, but I am a good coach. All right. That's my trait. Um, I'm going to coach my children probably until they are in high school. And then I'm just going to slam the brakes and sit in the stands and watch like a parent, because I do think children and kids at some point need feedback from other people than the person that is so proud of that person no matter what they do and isn't loving support, right? They need different feedback from a person that does not have that connection to them, right? So
Yeah.
I think that's the good dynamic when you have kids that leave that realm and go to a school system from being educated at home, because you're getting feedback from others. You just want the feedback from others to be good, right? You want to know where that
Yeah.
feedback's coming back from those individuals. But yeah, I mean, yeah, it's I wish I could just tell every parent that's out there right now that maybe misses something for their kids, right? Or it's a sporting event for work, or they felt like they were at home. Maybe they're working from home and they're getting, kind of like just unsteady and anxiety about their job, and kind of ignoring something that's going on with their kids, or handing them a tablet. Dude, I see this all the time, and I hate it. I hate it more than anything when I see a parent hand their kid a cell phone or a tablet because they have to do something, or I don't know. It's like one of my biggest
The
pet
easy
peeves.
babysitter.
Yes, dude. That individual, if they were to rewind back and see that moment, they would feel bad about that moment, right? And I just wish like someone would, yeah, that's just based
Yeah,
on what
I've
I
made
see in
a
family engagement. Like, you got to be there for your kids. That's number one, because someday you're going to regret that in that moment. Nothing else matters except your kids in that moment, right? So
I've made a handful of videos on screens with kids. It's an easy babysitter. That screen's raising your kid, and you don't even realize it because it makes it easy.
yeah, dude.
Yeah, the whole screen thing is so sad. So the average family, they spend the most amount of time with their kids at dinner. And there are families out there where their kids at dinner are only on screens. So then it makes you think, when are they actually spending time? Not in the same room. That's not spending time with someone. When are they actually spending time if at dinner they're also on screens, looking at screens? And it happens all the time.
Yeah,
And
man.
it is terrible. Like, to me, I'll just say it, like, it's fucking disgusting. I'll see little kids, 2 and 3 year olds, on iPads, their parents like have them on iPads just fixated on it. And I'm just like, oh, you suck. It is like, you suck. My kids don't know what a fucking screen is. We have a TV in the house that only comes on Saturday night, and it's a family thing. And we all take turns watching one thing a week. And if I had my next house is going to be a bigger house, and we're going to take that out of the living room and put it into its own TV room, to where we only go in there again once a week for one thing.
Yeah, dude.
My parents didn't let me just sit and watch TV. My mama was Mexican and made me go outside and ride my bike,
right. Yeah,
make fucking play with mud.
but we're different in that context, where the things that were on TV weren't so stimulating to us to want to
True.
laser focus, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
we'd watch a fun show, or we'd play a fun video game of Madden that was, not what Madden is today. Like, we got bored of playing Madden in 20 minutes. We were done, right? Like,
Yeah,
Madden today could have a kid play that thing until they took it to the Super Bowl for 24 hours straight, right? So
yeah,
there's that
they
different
intentionally make him
context.
more addicting.
Yep, 100%. So
Yeah, there's another thing that I tell women often is, there has never in the history of the world been a woman on her deathbed saying that she wished she pushed more papers.
yeah,
And we have so many women who want to focus on being like a boss lady, who want to focus on her career because society says to focus on her career versus focus on her children. And it's like, show me in history the woman who is like, I am so fucking glad I focused on my career versus my children.
Yeah.
Or even the women and the
And
couples who feel,
you could say man, or you could say father or mother at the
no,
end of the
yeah.
film, right? Like that
But
would
in
fit the bill for
society,
both.
we've been pushing women to have their own career when we men have always been providers. It's the new thing of forcing women culturally to be like, you got to have your own money. You can be a boss babe. You should focus on your career and making something of yourself. Where when that part is the part that's new. And it's like, so
Yeah.
how is that going to end up for you? And if you decide not to have kids, it's really lonely when you're 60 and you don't have children and grandchildren coming to see you. Life gets really fucking lonely.
Yeah.
Statistically, people live longer who are multi-generational, have multi-generational families. They just do.
Oh, we're
You have
healthier,
something to
right?
live
Like
for.
you're generally going to be more concerned about your children's health, which then transpires to your health, right? Like I will tell you right now, I have not had a beer in my fridge. Um,
Since you started watching my videos.
I'd say since Cooper was born.
Cooper's born,
So
nice.
yeah, so we're talking,
4 years? Or is Cooper
or
2?
Cooper's too. So
Okay.
I got living and learning early on,
Yeah.
right? Still things happen, but I wasn't like drinking in terms of where it was a problem. Never was that a case. We could say
Yeah.
differently 20s pre kids, but after kids, it was different. But now, like my context is if they see that they assume it's normal, right? It's all the norm if they're constantly seeing this.
Yeah.
So what I do is their norm, right? The last thing I want to do is them to see me come home and crack open a beer every single night when I sit there. Like I don't want them to envision that being the norm, right? So yeah, there are those kind of differences that take shape and take form in that dynamic that make us better. So if I did not have kids, I would still have beer in my fridge, right? And I would still kind of be living maybe a little less healthier than I do today. Maybe not so, and forceful on home cooked meals, right? Like in terms of that dynamic, maybe it would be a little different. Maybe I'm getting pizza and I'm having pizza and beer a little more than I do. So I would not live as long as I would with having children. So I think there's a difference in dynamic to that. But in terms of, to ask everybody and who's 60, 70, 80 who didn't have kids if they were okay with not having kids, I think you may get a good portion of there that would say that they don't have regrets about having kids. I feel that dynamic is different within one's personal viewpoints and how they've carried out their life, and maybe they did a lot of stuff that they wouldn't have been able to do had they have kids, or vice versa, right? Like you do things that are so awesome because you have kids, and that you didn't know you were going to do. Like right now, so I think my wife was saying Cash is stirring, he's getting up. Like the one thing that he loves to do, it's his element. I don't know where he gets this from. I've never done it in my life. Like it's his passion. So I've now picked it up as a hobby so I can somewhat help him along the way, right? But he decided 1 year ago when he was 3 years old that he wanted to play golf, right? Cash is like, dude, he's full speed. This kid is 110 miles per hour. Go, 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 go. When he's on a golf course, this kid is like the most calm, cool, and collected individual I can even like imagine Cash being, right? Like it is his element, it is his thing. It's been his thing for a year. He's looking forward to going to the golf course when he wakes up from his nap right now. So I think I was getting like the nudge, like, hey, I think he's stirring a little bit. He's ready to go.
Yeah.
Right. But that's something that if I did not have kids, I would not like come dressed to go golfing because I am,
Yeah.
right? I would probably never have found golf, right? But
Yeah.
we're doing like the range, or he'll go chip. Like he's what is he? He's a little over 4 years old. He turned 4 March 28th. We go to Washoe. They have a men's league at 5 p.m. and then the last tee it goes off at 3. So if we get the last tee, there's nobody behind us. We can kind of take our time. and we get to hole 3 at Washoe. This was last week. And the kid lines up, like hits it right on the edge of the green on a par 3, right? And then he runs up to it, gets a good putt. It's probably like a 25, 30-foot putt. He gets it, within 6 or 7 foot from the hole. I was like, hey, Cash, hey, this is for par, buddy.
Yeah.
Let's get it. And he just looks at me and smiles and then sinks it in for par, right? Like this 4 years old that just shot a par at a golf course, just, I don't know too many kids that can
hit par.
Not on that hole. No, he beat me. He won't know that. Like I'm not gonna tell him. Like I didn't shoot par. I shot a double bogey on that hole. But I'm not gonna not gonna.
Yeah.
I've got to be there to humble him a little bit. But it's the time's gonna come where it's gonna be tough to humble him, which is great with golf because golf is a sport that humbles you on its own, right? So, but yeah, that's something that in terms of my life now as a father and a husband, I care about what we're eating. I care about our health. I care about the relationships that are going on in the house. I think differently about maybe what's on TV or screen time usage, right? I'm not going to sit here. I wish I could say my kids never see any screen time. They do a little bit. Like Cash loves to watch golf. Like that kid will wake up in the morning, he'll go to the TV and he'll put on the golf channel and he will watch golf like he's 55 years old. It is the wildest thing to me, right? But
yeah,
I've got a couple videos where he gets super excited, like we were watching the Masters together, and like Scheffler shot it. Ends up winning the Masters, but he shot it, put it on the green, and Cash was like so into it, he jumped out of his seat, and it was like so suspenseful for Cash that Scheffler just, hit a 120-yard shot on the green. Like, I mean, who cares? Like, I'm not even that excited about that, right? But this, so I wish I could say that isn't in terms of screen time, but they don't get a lot. They definitely don't get a lot because I'm thinking about it, right? Like everything that I do in terms of my day-to-day life is thinking about how their life can be awesome, how it can be an environment for them to grow and someday be a husband and a father, and have that implementation in their life to make good decisions for my potential grandchildren if they choose to have kids, so there is that whole aspect of me trying to prepare them to succeed in life because it's going to come, right? My kid plays golf at 4 years old. What's the chances he's going to make money playing golf? Probably 0.00000000001%, right? Like, if he enjoys playing golf, and cool, take it as far as you want and I'll support you. But there's a very small percentage that he's ever going to reach that level, but he is going to someday be a man and potentially a husband and a father. And that's where I want to make sure he's the most fit to do so, as well as Cooper. Right. So that's the day to day. And that's kind of, my whole role as Glenn Wallin today than it was previously. As we started this podcast, early on, my life was completely different, in terms of that dynamic and how things have changed, how I've grown with my wife, how we've, overcome some obstacles, and there's still some that come up on a day-to-day basis, and we work together to try and get through there like a team, because that's what we are, right? We are a solid team working together, showing our kids that this is how it should be, so you can see and maybe understand the ballpark, and, little things that I think are lost within this culture, holding the door open for women, like that's the first thing that I have. When I think about it, sometimes I don't, I'm not perfect. Nobody's perfect, right? But when I can think about it, I have Cash or Cooper. If they're with me, they hold the door open, not only if it's my wife, but it's another woman through the door. And you should see like the communication that happens after that, right? Like, because it's such a shocking environment that's taking place, that I think will help them be savages when they're older, because they're going to do those things that will no longer exist in probably their generation of adults, so
we got to get Jackson and them together,
dude. We absolutely do.
Jackson's
for sure.
3.
It's so Cooper and Jackson are about the same age, right? So we should
So
next year. So I'm coaching Cash's
when does
T-ball.
Cooper turn 3?
Cooper turns 3 in November.
Okay, yeah. Jackson just turned 3.
So that's perfect.
People say he's a big 3-year-old, but I have no idea because I just don't see a lot of 3-year-olds.
They're 3,
fucking,
right? Like
yeah.
that 3-year-old could be small,
Dude,
and then massive when they're older.
My sister's 3-year-old is a fucking unit. He's almost 50 pounds.
That's wild, dude.
And like not a fat blob. He is huge.
Dude, that's insane.
Yeah, so when people are like, your son's big, I'm like, that right there is his cousin. They're 6 months apart and he looks 5.
Right. And who knows over the course of development, right? Your Jackson could pass and be, where you would think that Jackson was that size at that age. There's so much that happens at development. That's when we go to the doctor and say, oh, your kid's in the 60th percentile or 90th percentile. I was like,
dude,
okay,
my kids,
cool.
I don't even take
what's going to happen in 10, 15 years? We'll find out.
Yeah, exactly. I've gone like so freaking hippie that it's like, I don't even take my kids to the doctor.
Yeah.
It's like, why would I take my kids for me and my family? It's like, why would we take them?
Yeah.
It's like, but yeah, I have buddies who I have a buddy whose kid is like a month apart from my oldest. And he used to always be like, bro, doctor says 99th percentile off the charts. And it's just like, but what does that mean long term?
Yeah.
There's zero indication of intelligence from the time they're even where they're at 6 to where they're going to be at 18. There's zero correlation.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. Zero. And you could have took you and me when we were infants and said like you were in the 90 percentile in height, I was in the 60 percentile in height, and then we end up being the same height, right? Like, so it's
no, dude. I've been the same height since 14.
Dude, you have.
Somehow when you were 20,
you were right.
You grew like 4 inches.
Dude,
when you were like 20.
I grew 2 inches. When I was 18, I was 6 foot. When I graduated high school, I was 6 foot. When I had come back after my freshman year of college, I was 6'2". Right? Like I just grew 2 inches in college. But yeah, it's
14 years.
Everything's different. You can't put your, But,
yeah. Been the same height since 14. I thought I was gonna be much taller, and then everyone else would always just grow around me, and it was like, this sucks.